Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman, for his round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Grozev, I want to follow up a little bit on the interactions you've had with Russian intelligence about these AHIs. If you had a conversation with an intelligence officer a Russian intelligence officer where he or she said that these are the same weapons that were used in the 1980s, isn't that an admission that they know they're using them now?
It is an admission that it's very plausible that they're being used now because the person was not privy to this particular operation. He is or she is retired, but again, the important thing is that he was serving at a time when there was a concerted effort for the Russian intelligence services to develop a counter weapon, and he believed, given time passed since then, it has been developed.
I see. So he has retired, but believes that based on the similar symptoms, or what other factors went into his?
Very, very similar symptoms were being conveyed in terms of Soviet diplomats stationed abroad of intelligence background had returned back to Russia to the Soviet Union with symptoms that they believed were caused by an acoustic weapon. That was their belief. It's not the fact that it is what happened. But again, it explains partly the motivation for them to develop a weapon that will be targeting exactly the type of people that we see being targeted.
And I know there's some geospatial data that indicates there were Russian intelligence officers near alleged incidents abroad. Do any of you know whether that is also the case for any of the incidents that have been reported domestically?
I do not have that data because the particular unit that we've focused on, they would not dare come to the United States. Therefore, if the Russians were doing this on US soil, they would have used sleepers, long-term proxies that would be here, but that is not a unit that I've discovered in my own career.
And therefore, difficult to identify as affiliated with Russian intelligence.
Sir, I think you should refer that last question to the FBI and classified spaces.
Yeah, obviously, the episode with my client, an active FBI agent that was authorized to speak to 60 Minutes, talks about an incident in Key West, and most of that information is either law enforcement sensitive or classified.
Are any of you aware of any reported incidents from individuals who are not members of the United States government, domestically, I should say?
I am not, but I will throw a caveat in there. Generally, I only focused on former and current government employees that were attacked.
Mr. Zaid, are you?
There are many people who believe they are victims of AHIs. All you have to do is look at my Twitter feed whenever I post on the topic. I only represent federal government employees and their families, so I don't focus on the accuracy of those particular claims.
And Mr. Grozev, do you have any insight?
Not on American soil, but in other parts of the world, there have been complaints that appear to be credible from Russian activists or Russian opposition leaders living abroad.
And Mr. Zaid, I want to ask, and this is a hypothetical, but I'm trying to understand why our government would try to block information sharing or conceal information that they have. And one thing that comes to mind is whether there's an operational risk to revealing any of the details of their investigation. Is that something that you have come across in any of your work?
Yes, and quickly, because I know your time is elapsing here. So I do think that is, and I agree with Mr. Grozev, there's a lot of reasons why the information might not be publicly released. And I do think that's something we could address more in a classified environment to explain that. But there are understandable reasons why the U.S. government has not revealed much of what it knows. But the question is, how about to you?
But also, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that, there is a conclusion that has been made public that it is highly, highly, highly unlikely, I forgot what the language is, that these symptoms were caused by some sort of foreign malign actor.
So the last ODNI assessment that came out in 2023 had indicated, and it, to the public, it seems very damning. This highly unlikely that a foreign adversary was involved. But if you actually look at the levels within each of the agencies as to the level of credibility that they have assessed to that is actually quite low for most of them. And there's a lot of pushback, even internally, among some of the intelligence agencies as to the qualification of that information. I'll say just very quickly, finally, they talk about, in particular, I think one of the CIA's public documents, that many of these cases can be explained through environmental factors, pre-existing medical conditions, but they don't explain any of that, which could easily be said in another sentence. The environmental factors include the following, whatever, whatever. We looked at prior health conditions, and 85% had football injuries when they played in high school and college. None of that information is in there, which leads one to believe that there's something more. The other thing I'll say just really quickly on that, the news media missed the story on that CIA assessment. They said they looked at more than 1,000 cases, and they concluded the vast majority could be explained otherwise. But there are at least 24 cases that even the CIA acknowledges they can't explain away by any other alternative factors. That, to me, is the story that should have been in the New York Times and the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that there are 24 cases the CIA can't even explain away.
Is that part of your 68, Mr. Grozo?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
Thank you. And I thank the chair and our